Hey everybody, welcome to Center for Enhancing Abilities. My name is Tony. You've seen me on here before. I've done music. Well, today we're going to do some music, of course, but more so than the music itself, I'm going to talk a little bit about the music technology and some of my experiences with it. I've got some cool stuff to show you, and want to walk you through some of the technology and share some of my trinkets. So first of all, hello again to everybody. So let's start here. Our first item here we got here is what's called an Ediphone. Hold on a second. Let me just loosen this up a little bit. There we go. Apologies if we got the shaky cam going. But this is what's called an Ediphone. It is a little later version of what Thomas Edison put together as a wax, a tin cylinder, wax cylinder. Here's a picture of him back in, I think it was 1878. He went to Washington D.C. And patented his talking machine. So basically, this instrument here that we see in the picture was his magic talking box, and he used that to he kind of stumbled on it by accident. He discovered that a needle on tin could, when it vibrated and putting it onto a piece of tin or wax, he could reproduce the sound of his voice. So he was looking at it at first not as a big music medium as it later became, but more so as something for people to use in the office to take a letter. If somebody was wanted a letter written, they would use an item like this, and here we have a wax cylinder right here, and this little wax cylinder would go on here. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't work, but it's an old relic. I acquired it like many years ago. But basically, you would turn this thing on. The little wax cylinder right here would turn. There was a needle in there, and then you could talk into here, and you could say, yes, this letter that I'm writing is going to so and so about such and such topic, and blah 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 blah, whatever subject the note was or letter. So then, like a secretary would take this and then play it back, and then type a letter. So this is kind of the early version of what later became records and LPs and things like that. So it's pretty cool. These are pretty old, and like I said, it's pretty cool how this technology worked. If you notice, this is circular, and then as we move on in the technology, let me just move you right over here. As we move on to the technology, we can see that eventually the cylinder became a disc. So some of the early disc recordings were recorded on an item like this, and basically right here you'd have a little crank. You'd crank that up, put a disc on here. Let me see if I got a picture of a disc for you. Actually, right here. A while back, we had this picture was taken at Center for Enhancing Abilities in Bergen. This is a 78 record. It's kind of the precursor to what became the 33 and a third record. And these records were really heavy and thick, and they were called 78 RPM records because they would revolve at 78 78 revolutions per minute. So they would move really quickly, and the early records, they did not last long as far as time. So going back to these pictures here, you can see we have a Victrola and a gramophone. A gramophone, I don't know, does anyone recognize this little item here? It is a Grammy Award. I'm sure many of us have watched the Grammy Awards on television. Certainly, we may recognize this gentleman right here, these two gentlemen right here, and what he's holding in his hand, a Grammy. And a little more recently, we have Billie Eilish. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing her name. And here she's got tons of Grammy Awards for Best Song, Best Album, or whatever it was recently. So pretty cool. So going back over here, just giving you a little look here at this item. So as I said, this little disc will pop in here, and it revolves, and this item goes up and down, and there's a button back here that'll say, I think record. One would be to play back and record. So yeah, moving right along, I was mentioning records, and the first records that came out were 78 RPMs. So basically a record, let me show you. A record would have, here's a close-up of a record, and you can see that, there's a whole bunch of little lines on there, and a needle would be placed on it, and there's on a record, there's like a V groove, really tiny, where the needle falls right in between that groove, and as the disc revolves and vibrates, the sound would come out, and it would go into, in the early days, you'd have the needle on here, and then the sound would travel through this sound horn, and out would come the sound. So so that's an introduction there. The 78 RPM, like I said, would revolve at 78 revolutions per minute. Eventually, later, as this format was trying to better itself, and how time marches on and so forth, people were trying to, I guess, better the technology, put more information on a disc. So then you have your LP record, which is an LP record which is 33 revolutions per minute. So it's moving slower. Oh, and I did forget to mention, on a 78 record, you had an A side and a B side. So you'd record some music on one side. When it got to the end, you'd take the needle off, flip it over, and play on the B side. So like the 78 records were really thick. So now, like a 33 and a third, the technology, the record itself would be a lot thinner. and you could wiggle it a little bit, and it has a little give and take. It's plastic, so you could, being that it's 33 now, that means that's 33 revolutions per minute. So that's, instead of going really fast like 78, they slowed it down. So now you can fit more information on a 33 and a third record. And like I said, you have an A side and an A side and a B side. So this is cool. I really, I grew up listening to records. I remember my parents, they used to have like this humongous big stereo. It was like, it was like a piece of furniture, right? So this would take up, it was like the center point of the living room, So in there, we'd be, you'd listen to records, be able to flip them over, and I remember you could stack 5 or 6 of them, and hey, you'd have music for a while. So that was really cool. Some of the earliest memories I have of records, LPs, and cool stuff. Those definitely cool stuff. What I liked about records, for me, I liked was like opening up a record, right? You'd have a record, something big, and you would be able to open it up. And what's really cool is I used to love to read. I used to love to read all the lyrics. So here's a record by a group called Pink Floyd, The Wall, and you can see that all the lyrics to the song, there's information on who played what instrument on the song, where it was recorded, when it was recorded. So a lot of cool information. If you're a fan, definitely cool stuff. Definitely cool stuff. I used to love to sit with a big pair of headphones and just listen to music and just study the liner notes. See, this would be part of the record. The insert. This would protect the record, and it was cool because, like I said, you could really appreciate the artwork. And things were big, and you could open it up and check it out, and it was really cool. So yeah, I got a couple of my old records here. Check this one out. This one's a Rolling Stone record from the 1960s, and this is like some cool kind of 3D thing. If you look at the faces, they're like moving around. So this is an old Rolling Stones record on here. There's a song on here called "She's a Rainbow." I think that's the only one, maybe the most popular one. But anyway, this came out mid-60s, and just what's really cool is the artwork. You could check out the artwork. It was really big, and then, like I mentioned before, you could look at the liner notes or stuff like that. Here's the back, and they talked about how they recorded the songs and who wrote the songs and stuff like that. So if you were a fan, you could learn a little, some info about the band and stuff like that. Here's another record of mine, a group called Yes. This was a very favorite record of mine, and I really like the artist on here. The artist was Roger Dean, and he used to do all their record covers. And again, like I said, you'd open up the record and you could find out information about the band, the ideas behind the songs, and the lyrics, of course. The lyrics, so you know what they're singing. They have a song called Roundabout that I really enjoy off of this record. Let's see, I got another one. This one's from 1969. King Crimson. Kind of freaky, wild looking album cover design somebody designed. But again, you could see that it was a, you know, you'd open it up, what they call a gatefold album. You'd open it up and you could see more of a picture. You open it up and of course you got more artwork and lyrics and information about the record, the band, and stuff like that. Here's the Beatles, Let It Be. And some cool pictures of the band when they were recording this record. So there's the famous rooftop concert. Famous rooftop concert pictures and stuff like that. The last time they appeared in public. Last time they appeared live, which was, I believe, 1969, January of 1969. So, and this was supposed to be a record of them getting back to their roots. Actually, they recorded one record after this one, but this one was subsequently released afterwards, so it became the official last release. But it's cool. Like I said, you could open it up, and some of the books, some of the records would have a little booklet and stuff like that. So it was cool. So that's LPs. Also another format when I was a youngster was the 45 RPM. So right here we got a 45 RPM record here. So, and actually I have one here with me. So 45 record here. This is an original Beatles 45 record from back in the day. 1963, I believe, yes. Yes, it says recorded in England. So I saw her standing there. And on the B side, or I guess this was a double A side record here. You got I Want to Hold Your Hand. So this is what's called a 45 RPM. A 33 and a third ran a little bit slower, and you had an A and a B side just like this, but this was a 45 RPM. So it was smaller, and it was 45 revolutions per minute. So it would go a little bit faster than the B side. I'll include it in the link afterwards, but there's a really cool, like 3 or 4 minute video where they talk about the record companies and how they had the record wars. I mean, I believe it was either Columbia Records or one of them that came out with the 33 and a third record first, and then the other company, I'm blanking on who it is, but they came out with the 45 because they figured people wanted one or two songs. So instead of buying like a full format, 33 and a third record, which would run you, if you have a full record, full album of songs, would be 35, 40 minutes. This was just the hits, folks. So one song per side, like the record. And yeah, so this is one of the first ones I got, one of the first records I got when I was a youngster. And as I got older, they came out with like picture discs. Here's one by the Police. So same thing. But what was neat, you see this hole right here? If you compare that with like a 45, a 33 and a third, you can see that the hole is definitely right here. You got a smaller hole, and then this one had a bigger hole on it, right? So for the record players, you'd have to get what was called a little spindle, and I'll show you a picture of it. I don't know, can you see that? Let me just turn my camera. Anyway, so this was a little popular little thing for when you're listening to the records, and you'd take this little item here, and it would pop in this hole. It would pop and just stay right in that hole, and then you could put your record on your record player, and you were in business. All right. So, hey, let me just take a quick break and say, if you're just tuning in, this is Tony. I'm with Center for Enhancing Abilities, and today I'm just showing you some of my records from back in the day. And just sharing some of my cool trinkets here from back in the day. So the 45 records were really cool. I remember buying those as a kid. I think they were like $1. I think they went, they went up a little bit more after that. But then, they got replaced. People were buying more cassettes and getting away from the vinyl. Actually, tapes. So this is an interesting item right here. Hold on, let me just turn that a little bit closer and turn that down. So right here we have, I don't know, you can't really see it, but I happen to have one of these right here. There's an 8-track tape. So you had an 8-track tape, and actually I'm sorry, I'm kind of introducing things before the other things. You had what was called cassette tapes. So right here's a favorite from back in the day. And this was a cassette tape. And you could take this and pop it into, you'd open up a cassette player and pop it in there, and you could listen to your music. And just like records, you could flip it over. You'd have your A side and B side. Now, what's interesting is another format. If you look, if I could show you a little closer what this looks like, you had 2 reels in here. They're 2 circular reels. And this was kind of a miniaturization of this format here. Let me go back to my illustration, right here. This is what's called a reel-to-reel deck. I actually have one upstairs, and I thought about getting it. Maybe one of these days I'll dig it out, but I have a walk-in closet that I can't really walk into anymore. And I have a reel-to-reel deck, and what's really cool, I actually have the take-up reels right here. And when I was in college, I took an audio production class, and in the audio production class, we used reel-to-reel decks, and we did what was called splicing, kind of a precursor to, I guess, what people do when they sample. When they sample a record, you're taking a recorded segment, from point A to point B. You cut those on either end, and then you'd take the ends and you'd put them together. You'd splice them together and put them into a tape machine, and you'd create a loop. So you can record somebody saying, "Hey, how's it going?" And it would, if you took the both ends together and put them together, it would be like, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going?" And you would create a loop. So we did stuff like that in our class, so we could appreciate editing. So right here, this is I guess one of the reels here, and I was looking at it because I was taking it out of my closet, and you can see on here, I don't know how well you can see it, but I would make splices. Here's a splice right here. You can see where I made like a little slice, and I cut one point right here. You can see a little diagonal line on there. Apologies if it's not really clear, but it was called splicing. So you can take one segment and put it with something else. Like I remember getting a whole bunch of recordings from our instructor, and we had to make what was called a montage. So it was really neat. You'd take a segment of one one sound effect or song, and then cut it and then put it together with something else, and it was cool taking that. So you'd have everything on one of the tape heads. One of the reels had all the information, and then the second reel, as this one would turn, the tape would eventually move its. You'd move the tape. It would go on to the second reel. Kind of the same it's the same kind of thing, ideas that, like, if you've seen an old projector, there would kind of be like, one would be up a little bit higher, and as it would unroll, you'd see the information that was being played, and it would go from one reel to another reel, and then you'd take that reel off, and then this one would get switched, and you put a brand new reel and more information. Kind of the same idea with audio. This is magnetic audio tape. So what you were doing is you'd speak, kind of going back to the old Edison Ediphone thing. You'd talk into a microphone, and your voice would travel in through, and the vibrations, using magnets, these tapes were magnetic and had what's called iron oxide, and your voice, when you spoke, it would vibrate, and you could adjust these little iron oxides on here, and it would duplicate your voice, and you play them back. Apologies, I know that's kind of a really funky explanation, but I wanted to show you that before I talk a little bit more about the cassettes. So basically, it's the same principle as a reel-to-reel, but a lot smaller. Obviously, you have here we go, side one, right? So you have all the information on here. Excuse me, right here we go. You have all the information on this side, and then it's just traveling, and then there's another reel over here on this side, and all the information, eventually the tape from this side would travel through the bottom here, and join itself up on the other side, and you'd have a playhead that would come right up against this part, and if you look really closely, you can see there's a really small little foam piece right here. It's right there where my finger is. Apologies, I'm trying to show you. And that would come between the tape and the playhead, and the playhead would go on there, and then you could hear what was on your tapes. So I'd play you some music, but due to copyright and stuff like that, I guess I could show you. I have a cassette deck here, so I could kind of give you a quick look at it here. Man, this thing's dusty. So that would open up. See how this little door here? Eject. You take your tape, pop it in there, close the door, press play, and hey, you were in business. I used to love the cassette technology, because what I used to do, and I'm sure some of my friends who are watching right now could attest. I used to listen to the radio a lot, and you'd wait for your favorite song, and when your favorite song would come on, you'd run to your cassette deck and bring it right up to the speaker of the radio, and then you'd hit record, play and record, and you'd record your song. That's your song off the radio. That's how I did it as a little kid, and it was pretty cool. And then you have to actually take that back. It was crazy, because you either bought a 45 record or an LP, or you did what I did, like that. You'd get a cassette deck, and you'd wait for your song, and then you'd record, you'd hit record, and then just hope that you got a good recording, you know, like your little brother didn't come in and say, "Hey, what you doing? What you doing?" Because then you're like, man, you know, you're recording the sound in the room along with the radio and everything like that. There wasn't a built-in microphone that would go just and record what was on the radio. So I had this cool thing. It was called a Panasonic Take and Tape. Here's a picture of it. Apologies, you probably really can't see it on here, but let me see if I can zoom in on it. No, but there we go. That's a little bigger. Can you even see that? I'm looking. I can't. Yeah, that's too bright. Hold on. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I see my friend Kelly saying, yeah, I have 5 brothers. So I guess you tried doing that as well. So basically, you know, you'd hear your favorite song on the radio. For me, it was, you know, one of many 70s songs, you know, and I'd be like, I like this song. And I used to love, at the end of the year, they would have the top 100. And I remember big time, the top 100 of 76, the bicentennial. Wow, man. Oh man, we're going back quite a bit, but it was fun. And I remember, you know, all the radio stations would have the end of the year. They, you know, and I think they still do it now. They do it like a 4th of July, you know, yeah, they do it like Labor Day or 4th of July and you know, at the end of the year, and they'd play all the top songs. You know, they'd do polls, and they, you know, look at the charts and hey, these were the top songs of this year. And actually, I guess if you can look it up, and you can find out each year what was like the #1 song and the top 10 songs and stuff like that. I used to just love that stuff. I still do, matter of fact. I like going back and looking back and hearing some of the old tunes. But anyway, back to cassettes. So yeah, I used to make my own. You know, it was fun. You could make your own. You could make your own kind of recordings, and you could make your own mixtape. Anyone ever make a mixtape? As the technology got better, you were able to have your cassette integrated with either a record player or a CD player, which is coming up, and you could make your own kind of mixed tapes, and it would be a direct. So I guess there wouldn't be an external microphone; it would be something internal. So whatever you were playing on the record would transfer over to the cassette deck, and you could do you could do a little mix, and I think they called it dubs. Yeah, you dub whatever song you really liked. I guess, you know, so you wouldn't scratch. You know, you buy a new record, so and then you dub it so it wouldn't. So you could listen to it on a tape, and if the tape snapped, well, then you could take your cassette and a pencil, and you could pull the tape out. And do you remember before I was showing you the splices? You do a little minor surgery on your cassette tape, and you know, hopefully your cassette deck didn't mangle and chew up your tape. You could restore it some. But I remember doing that, and then, you know, like I said, sometimes some things would go haywire in the cassette box, so you'd have to take a pencil and you know, kind of do funky stuff, pull out the tape, line them up on a table, you know, on a table or something like that, and with a little piece of tape, and carefully cut each side. So I used to do that. So, going back to the 45s, here's a 45 that I never opened before. It was what year? 87, group called the Grateful Dead, and this this was a special gray vinyl. The song is called Touch of Gray. And I figured, hey, I've heard this song 1,000 times on the radio. Why should I open up my copy that I bought? I'm just going to leave it in here, and maybe down the road, you know, could save it. I used to work, actually, I used to work at a record store years ago, a record store called Record Town in Middletown, New York. And yeah, so people would come in and buy records. This was a special disc gray vinyl for the song. And I wish I had one here, but what they were doing, like in the 80s too, they were taking records and they'd make a picture disc. So it would be like the album cover on the disc. And I had one of Sgt. Pepper, the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper. So if you ever seen that famous record, that famous cover of it on the record itself. So they figured out a way to put the picture on the vinyl, kind of just like what they did with the gray vinyl here, making it gray. You know, they just customized it. So pretty cool, pretty cool. So marching on. So I mentioned the cassette deck, cassette format. Also another format. I think it was early 80s that came out, was a micro cassette recorder, and I used to take and record stuff on here as well. Kind of similar to what you use your iPhone now if you want to make a quick recording of something. I'd use a little micro cassette recorder, and that was basically like the size of something like this. I use this for like business cards and stuff like that. But it just something like that would fit in your hand. And like the cassette deck, it had a little door that opened. You take your cassette, your micro cassette. See, it's very similar to the technology on a cassette, but it was smaller, so it was a micro cassette. And lift the door open, this would go in, press play, and you'd be like, don't forget the Murphy meeting tomorrow at 5:30. Make sure you attend. So people would use a micro cassette recorder to, jot notes. I used to use it to, when I first was learning how to play the guitar, just to record myself and hear it back later and say, wow, I better erase that. But it was a fun way to, document whatever you were doing. And so it was fun. Oh, I skipped over it too, but another format when I was a kid was the 8-track, which was kind of, I think it came out a little bit later than the cassette, but the cassettes kind of didn't catch on till after this. Now you would have all your this would be like the length of a record, a 33 record, and you would take that and you would pop it into. I remember seeing them as a kid. People had them in their cars. You could pop this in and you'd listen to, like a whole record on here. You can see how big and bulky it is compared to a cassette, Well, a cassette's pretty big too, but this was bigger. Kind of the same idea as the cassette, a head would come, boom, and there was one reel in here, but what it did was it would travel around and then eventually respool itself back on using just one reel, like cassettes had two. And I think these were bi-level, so it would record. I mean, it would play, and then eventually it would come back around to the beginning. These were cool, and I think I have a picture of an 8-track player that I used to have. Check that out. So this right here, let me see. Hopefully you can see it. If not, I apologize. There we go. I could see it in the picture here, but this was the Panasonic Dynamite, it was called. So basically, you take your 8-track tape, and it would go on the side here like that, and then this little plunger here, you would press that down, and hey, you were in business. You were listening to music, and what was cool, but more so annoying is you'd have a recording, right? Like me, I was into what's called progressive rock, prog rock for short. So groups like I mentioned before, like Yes, they'd have songs that were like 15, 20 minutes long, and so you'd start listening to a song. You'd start listening to this song on an 8-track, and it was weird because it would like the song would like fade out, then you'd hear click click, and it would go on to another track. It was called an 8-track, but each track but there were four. It was 8-track because there was a left and a right signal for stereo, and on 4 tracks, so 4 times 2 is 8. So that's why they call these 8 tracks, and on each side was maybe about 15, 12, 15 minutes per side. So sometimes you'd have an 8-track of something, and the songs would be in different order because the record companies wanted to try and not have it, fade out in the middle of your favorite song, So, and then sometimes there'd be like a gap. It'd be like really silent, and I remember I was like, "Wow, man, did my 8-track break?" And you'd be waiting there, and you'd be like, "Oh man, this thing's not working." You'd walk over to it, all of a sudden it'd go click, click, and then okay, and then your next track would play. At first it was cool because I was just, hey, this is something different, but later on it was just like, wow, what a bummer, that it's fading out. Like it'd go into like a piece of music would go into a solo, and then it would fade out a little bit. Then you'd hear click, click. Then it'd come back up, it'd fade back up, and the song would continue. So that's 8 tracks. And yeah, the Panasonic 8-track tape was was a funky format. It definitely was. Getting back to cassettes, I don't know if anyone ever had one of these. So this is mine from back in the day, and I think this was early 90s, I think it was. So like the other cassette deck that I showed you, this would open up, if you're me, you would take your Beastie Boys cassette, pop it in there, and press play. And of course, you'd need to have a set of headphones. So you'd pop that on, take that, find the little jack here. There we go, right in there. Oh no, that was so you can plug it into a DC 3-volt. Here we go. This is what we're looking for right here. So you pop that in there, and what are the controls we have on here, Tony? So we had normal, then there's normal, and then hold on a second. These come in handy. Hold on, let's see what we got going on here. So normal, limit, and I'm trying to, wow. Man, once upon a time. So normal and limit. So, I mean, you could listen to something and you could switch it, kind of like a thing with the fidelity, if you wanted to hear more of the highs and the lows and stuff like that. Yeah. Fight for your right to party, yes. So the Sony Walkman was really popular because now you could take your music with you. You wouldn't have to be stuck at home on a Friday or Saturday night, listening to all your music. I mean, you could be like, see ya. And you're on your way. You're in business. So, cool. So this was a fun format. And going back to what I mentioned before, you could make your mixtapes and stuff like that. And around I think it was early 80s, they started coming out with what's called the compact disc. Here is a picture of a logo. Can you see that? Probably, can you? There we go, the compact disc. And I remember when compact discs came out because, like I said, in the 80s, I worked in a record store. And, you know, they were like, oh, this sound is going to be superior to records, 33 1/3, 45s. You won't have to worry about your records getting scratched. And the fidelity, the audio quality was supposedly better. So the technology behind that was you would take a, you know, there was a series of zeros and ones and zeros, and basically you were taking that information and putting it onto the disc here, and a little laser would read that information, and the magic would happen. You would be able to listen to your favorite records, but now on compact disc. I remember I had a girlfriend at the time who would take these, and she'd be like, because, hey, you could check yourself out. Say, look, here you go, Facebook. I could see you on my little phone here. So the information would be like kind of sandwiched in between this clear plastic, and on the other side you'd have all your track information. So I mean, this was cool. And then just kind of like the technology with the cassette Walkman, they came out with a CD Walkman. So it's kind of the same thing. I think I got a picture of it. I got a picture of one of the ones I first had right here. Let's see, hopefully you could see it. Can you see that? No, I can't. But anyway, it was kind of like a clamshell. It was, oh, you know what? We can use this. I can show you. So this is a mixed CD I have here. What does it say? It says iTunes Volume 3. iTunes, remember that, because we'll be talking about iTunes in a few seconds. But basically, you know, it'd be kind of shaped like a clam like this, and it'd open it up, and you pop your CD in there, close it up. On the outside, press a play button, and hey, you got a set of headphones like these, and you were in business. So that's how you know, I remember listening to music in that format after records, because these were obviously smaller. As you can see, the technology between that and something like this. So here's a record, here's a CD, a lot smaller. So the information is getting smaller. It's lighter, so you can carry a whole bunch of these. In my car, I remember I had a little clamshell. I remember I had a clamshell CD Walkman, so I was able to hook that into my stereo, and I was able to listen to music while I was driving. And it would be like, not the radio, because on the radio they would play tons of commercials, and you know, you'd kind of have to listen to what they whatever was being sent out. So the Discman, the Sony Discman, portable CD player, even your Walkman, if you could figure out how to like wire that and put that through your car stereo, you were cruising, and you were in business, you know, having your sounds and listening to whatever you want. So kind of the downside for me for the CDs is, you know, they were mentioning that these things could last forever, but you know, when I was living in Jersey City, my brother was living with me, and we used to listen to CDs all the time and pop it in and take it out, and it'd get thrown on the floor. You know, you'd come in, you know, you'd forget it's there. You walk into the room and you step on it. These things would get scratched just like old records would. And sometimes they wouldn't play, and you know, so it has its downsides. But also, I mentioned before when I was showing you the Pink Floyd album, you know, right here, the Wall. So what was cool with that was, you know, like I mentioned, you know, you could open this up and look, wow, look at all of these lyrics, right? You know, it'd be on the inside, what would be holding your record, you know, your record sleeve. Either that, or you'd open up a gatefold, you know, like so. Hold on. You'd open it up and look, there's all this artwork and cool stuff. But now with CDs and things getting smaller, so now all that information is getting into a smaller format like this. And Kelly's telling me that she was a radio DJ. You know, I was a radio DJ intern, and man, oh man, my appreciation goes out to people who do that, because there's definitely an art to plugging and playing things and being conversational, and you know, you've got a whole list of things that you need to do every hour. Hi Janice. Hey, let's take a moment and see who's on there. I've been jib-jabbing quite a bit. Let's see who we got online here. Who we got? All right. Wow. Hey Steph. And Mark, cool. And Ken. Hey Ken, what's up, man? All right. And Cheryl. All right. Hello Cheryl. And Kara. And Amy, cool. Cool, everybody. And of course, Kelly and Nomi, hello. Cool. So yeah, so if you're just tuning in, this is Tony with Center for Enhancing Abilities, and just talking music, but talking music formats today and fun stuff. If you're just tuning in, right here is an old relic of a item called an Ediphone, the precursor to what was records. You had a wax cylinder that would spin around, and a needle would go on here and make little vibrations and record, and you could play it back, just like you know, later on the records, how the records would come out, and the information was on there as well, you know, but on a platter, a disc. Interesting how the information is still kind of circular. So you went from a cylinder like that, I hope someone's got that, to a record disc, to a cassette deck, to a cassette. Mind you, it's circular. The information is, but we're talking, the medium now is magnetic tape, and using magnets on iron oxide and aligning them with the vibrations from your voice to make a sound recording. So cool stuff. So where did we leave off, Tony? We were recapping. We were talking about cassettes. So we march on. So we were talking about CDs. That's where I left it. So yeah, I showed you, I had the Pink Floyd LP. So now this is what came with my Pink Floyd CD, because that's the other thing. You'd be like, wow, all right, I had this on LP and I played it 2,000 times, and now it's on CD. So the audio quality is supposed to be better. So, you know, you buy it on CD. But now, all that information, I mean, they were cool to do something like this, you know, and put all the information on there, but holy cow, to read this stuff, I'll have to use my friend here. So yeah, I mean, you'd have to really get in there. I mean, you could see it, but wow, it's so small now. And like, the artwork was cool. I mean, seeing it really big, like, you know, from that, so you can see a lot more detail, right? You see a lot more detail there. And now to that, it's just a lot smaller. So that was kind of a drag. And then some records, some CD releases, they would have information. I like Pink Floyd. They were cool. I guess, you know, they were able to put all the information in there. But some CDs of groups, you know, you wouldn't get all that information. And I definitely would miss that stuff. I would miss that, because I used to really look at the liner notes and study, hey, who played on what track, how long was it, and stuff like that. Check it out here. Got a record from back in the day from my boys. If you guys didn't know by now, I'm a super Beatles fan. So yeah, so CDs. So marching on. So CDs. CDs. Eventually, the technology got so that you could record on a CD. You could do record what's called a CDR. So yeah. So this is a little CD of my music that I made. I've made cassettes of my own music, and this one I have a couple covers on here. This one I could actually play for you because hey. So, and it was cool because you could take your information and you could make a CD, kind of like a mixtape that you did in the, like back in the day with cassettes, but now you could do it with your CDs. So this is a song I recorded back in the day, you know, and I use what's called a 4-track machine. So it's cool. You could record your own music, put it on your cassette, and that's what a lot of musicians and bands were doing, you know. And a lot of the record companies, it was going crazy because the record companies were like, no, you got to do it this way, and people were like, hey, we can do this ourselves. We don't need the big record companies. I can record my own CD and have it pressed, and I can sell it at my shows or whatever I'm doing. And that began like a whole change of what's happening with the record companies, and moving forward a little bit more. So from CDs you move on to what's called the MP3. I think that was late 80s, very early 90s. So MP3s, so they're digital audio files. And I remember getting one of these. I don't know if you can see it. Apologies. Can you see it? Probably not. Apologies, folks. I can't. Well, basically, it was an Apple iPod, and what was really cool, and again, an Apple iPod was maybe about the size of this little item. This I used to hold business cards. So it was about like this size, and like the CD, like this cassette Walkman, you'd plug it in there. But what was neat about this thing, it held mega tons of music, a whole bunch of music. Like, you know, like the CD Walkman was cool. You'd take one of these and then you could buy like a little carry case, and you put like 10 of these in. Now with an Apple iPod, you could take all those CDs and through your computer digitize everything and put it onto something like the size of this, and you're in business, out the door. Once again, your music is mobile. So that was really cool. So MP3s eventually, I mean, those were really popular for, you know, MP3 formats and stuff like that, and iTunes through Apple. You get your music through them. And now I mean, there's streaming services, so you don't the music exists in the clouds, and if you have an account, you're able to listen to your music that way, and you can use your phone to listen to music. So, but it's interesting to see how over the years the formats and things, how you went from something like this to a record, and then other formats and stuff like bands, musicians, artists used to record onto real, on this is a small one, a small tape format. There were many formats, and there were some that were like, I think 2-inch wide, so that would hold a lot more information. This, I think, would be like 2 tracks, and like a 2-inch tape or something like that, which was a lot bigger. So the information, you could do what was called multi-tracking. So, I mean, I think in the 60s it was 4, 8, 16, 24, 48. Now, I mean, with the digitization of everything, I mean, it's infinite how many channels you can record. You figure you have like a grid, you have a starting point, an end point, and then you've got just kind of like layers of a cake. You know, you can lay down your first track, the second track, third track, fourth track, and it all plays. You know, you, like I said, you have a start, and an end, and pretty cool what you can do now with the technology. I think it's easier now to do recordings and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of like a lot of people are doing it now, and the music itself, I mean, is a lot more computerization, and where I guess back in the day, you know, we're talking 20, 30 years ago, they were, you know, if they wanted a sound, you recreated it yourself on an instrument. Now you can buy software that you can have on your computer, and then you have once again a grid set up on your computer, and that it'll take that information and then you pop it in. Just kind of like, if you can think of like when you're writing a document on your computer, you know, how you can save it, go back, take things out. Now, I mean, you could do that with the music. And I mean, there's always still doing things live, but the recording technology has changed, and it's just really, I think it's really interesting, and it's fascinating how it changed. So, going back to the CDs, so you had the Apple iPod, right? So as that got smaller, I remember I got one of these. This was I think this was a iPod Nano. So I think this held just as much. I mean, I remember I had I think it was a 4th generation Apple iPod. It was like 40 gigs, and I don't know how many thousands of songs I can hold on. And then, you know, I got this, which is kind of it's like the size of a postage stamp. Look how thick it is. You know, it's got that wheel like the Apple iPod, but look how small this is. You know, you could take this and you pop it into your shirt, plug into it, and hey, you're out the door. Once again, your music is mobile. And now with so from this to now with like streaming, You don't even need this. You don't even need this anymore. You have your phone, and you hear it, and then you can stream it. So yeah, so some fun formats and different formats. So interesting. My friend Kelly, you used to be a radio disc jockey. That sounds cool. And yeah, the format, that you can just plug into something like this and be out the door. Plug and play. Just making it, the technology is making it simple, much more simple to enjoy your music. So, cool. Hey, Allison. Hi, Janice. How's my buddy? How's my buddy Will? Who else is online? Hey, Deborah. My coffee cup. So, how do you folks listen to music now? Me currently, I use my phone. I listen to, one of the streaming services, and yeah, all I have to do is type in an artist, a song, and I'm hearing it in a few seconds. What do you guys do for music? I mean, there's always still YouTube. You can go to YouTube and play a video. And now, with the TVs, they come with YouTube built right in, so you could be watching it on your TV, or on your phone. You could be grooving that way. So good stuff. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I'm glad I was able to share some of my my music trinkets from back in the day, and talk a little bit about it. Definitely some fun times. If you have any questions for me, please include them here, and I'll try to answer those. And yeah, I mentioned earlier about the record war formats. There's a really cool PBS documentary called Sound Breaking, which I had watched a while back, and they talked about everything from the record wars, the different formats, which is I kind of went over a little bit here, and then the technology. There's like a cool one on how multi-track recording, how from like recording in the 30s all the way to the present day, how that technology has changed, and how you could layer things upon layer, like where back in the day you only had one or two channels, and then you'd have to get another machine and take that machine and take the information from the first machine, put it onto the second machine, and then play those together, and then record them to a third, and then that's what was called piggyback, when you take the recordings and condense them and re-record them onto another either a tape or whatever. So good stuff. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow at 2:30 and be sharing some music with you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep it rocking. All right, we'll catch you soon. Thanks. Bye.